Word. You're here with Mike, Ron, and James. Um, we put together a great show for you today about Nimrod and the two pillars. But before we get into it, we'd like to thank our sponsors. Us. Yeah, we put this together. We bought our shit and we put it together. Thank you, Brian, for producing. And thank you, Andrew. And hand it off to James real quick.
Make sure to follow us on all social media outlets, Twitch being our favorite. Hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications to stay up to date with our new content.
Okay. Well, views and topics of Keepers of the Word are solely our opinions and do not reflect the opinions of any Masonic Grand Lodges or lodges in general. All right, now that we got the formalities out of the way, we're here to talk about Nimrod, Nimrod the Hunter, and the two pillars. Oh,
You're gonna jump right into it, huh? No,
yeah.
Yeah.
no, how you doing? No, none of that social stuff, anything
No, we'll
like
do that
that.
later, man, because there's a lot to
Cool.
cover. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know,
I
during
know.
your research, did you find like 7 different stories?
Um, I didn't find a lot of different stories, but I wasn't looking for a lot of different stories. I'm always looking for more the connection between the lore and the history, the actual, what can be validated as far as evidence is concerned. So that's kind of the route that I went when I was looking for stuff.
Okay.
Let's get
So,
the basics out
yeah,
here.
let's go through the biblical figure part.
Go for
So,
it.
in the Bible, it's mentioned in the book of Genesis and book of Chronicles, the son of Cush and therefore a great grandson of Noah. Nimrod was a king, was described as a king in the land of Shinar, Mesopotamia. Bible states that he was a mighty hunter before the Lord and began to be mighty in the earth. Later, extra Bible traditions identified Nimrod as the ruler who commissioned the construction of the Tower of Babel, which led to his reputation as a king who was rebellious against God.
Yeah, his name literally means the rebellious one or to rebel.
Right. Nimrod has been attested in any other historic non biblical registers. Historians have failed to match Nimrod with any historical attested figure. Where you hear about him a lot is in Jubilees.
Book of
His name,
Jubilees.
they have his name in Nimrod, which means in Greek, it's Greek form of Nimrod, only being only as being the father of Azarad, the wife of Eber, and the mother of Peleg. The account would thus make Nimrod an ancestor of Abraham and hence of all the Hebrews. Um, you want to take it from there, James?
Sure. I can break down really quick. We went through what his name is. It means rebellion. His father is Cush. Um, what else can we say about him? This guy came out of the woodworks, so they tell there's multiple stories about this guy from different civilizations, from the Assyrians to Sumerian, from Ibsdabar to all kind of stuff. His name changes around who he is. They say he's Gilgamesh. They say he could have been Sargon the Great. He could have been all these different things. Um, One thing that we do need to kind of point out is basically in all of his actions, the sum of all of his actions and all of these stories, he's challenging the gods. Okay. So what the metaphor for this archetype that he is literally is he's the archetype for the new man. From God does all to I do all. It's me. I am God from within. So instead of him praying to a god, he got out there and he did everything for his own self. That's why he started saying that I am the one that should be worshipped because I came here, I did this, I did this, I took over all these people. They come to me with open arms and not God. So after the flood, imagine this. There were still people on the earth, and he rounded them up. He rounded them up, and you have stories where you have the sons of Noah talk about what Nimrod is doing. And, they come back and give him a report of what's going on and how worried they are. And this is where we talk about the twin pillars. There's two different pillars, and on these pillars were written sciences, sciences, skills. People would say magic. But this is the same thing that was handed out in the Dead Sea area from the fallen angels. This is the same stuff that was given to Noah in the book of Adam, so he can build the Ark of the Covenant. These were to these people they were magic, but if anybody would look at it, it was science. It was all the different sciences that were put together in a way to teach and to learn. So this is what he got on his own, and he dug them up out of the mud. It's 100 feet worth of mud. He dug them up. He ended up finding them. Basically, he found a city, and I believe it was underneath Uruk, right? Uruk.
I believe it
That's the
was
first one
underneath
he
Uruk.
built. And so, you got to imagine that when this flood happened, you had a couple 100 feet worth of mud that settled over entire cities that you could not see no more. So he knew where these cities were at, and these cities were supposed to be of the gods. And he went and there was nothing there no more, and built a city right on top. And the first thing he did was dig. And to do that, he needed stonemasons. He needed to support the structures of the walls to get down into there. And they pillaged that city, and they took what they can from that city to rebuild civilization because there was really nothing left after the flood.
So it said in other texts where if he knew that God was going to drown the earth again, that he was going to build a tower too high for the waters to reach.
Correct.
And the place wherein they built the tower is now called Babylon because of the confusion of languages, which they readily understood before. For the Hebrews, mean by the word Babel, confusion.
Right. So Babylon or Babylonia means gate of the gods. And then later, confusion became attributed to the Tower of Babel, and the word or slang Babel, to Baba, to Babel.
To Baba, to Babel.
Right.
And somebody just asked a question. I wonder how many more cities there are buried. You know
Tons,
what?
tons. We're still finding new ones. There's Indian cities that were in the Mahabharata that were,
Mayan.
the Mayan ones. There's like hundreds of
Gobekli
miles.
Tepe. Gobekli
Well,
Tepe is
yeah,
buried.
that
Also,
was
there's
buried on
also
purpose.
and there's also a city in someplace in, I believe it's Malaysia, that was also that they originally thought was just a hill, and they've discovered that it was a ziggurat that was buried also there. And I'm not sure if it was buried on purpose or if it was
Yeah.
a post diluvian situation.
There's one in China too. It's like they thought it was a mountain,
Hmm.
and this guy was farming, and
See-
his dog, I think, dug up something, and it was like, what the hell?
So, question about the two pillars. They obviously existed pre-flood, right?
Correct.
Who created them?
Yeah, that's a really good question because that gets really diluted really quick. So we do know that these things were built. One was to withstand flood, and the other one was to withstand fire.
Hmm.
So just since you bring that up, and we're talking about now destruction by water and destruction by fire, it has to be noted that basically when this took place, everybody was on their mind was we're going to get flooded again. Everybody wanted to build in the mountains. They don't want to build down in the plains. That's the first place he went was the plains because he knew the cities were there. So in the Persian mythos, so the Zoroastrian, basically the same exact story. Instead of the flood with Noah, it's a flood with somebody else. I can't remember the guy's name. And basically, he tells them to build a castle on the highest mountaintop because it's going to flood. So this is very similar to the pillar. I mean the Tower of Babel.
One, and this is to add what you're saying to what you're saying. Amari AF. The Bible tells us that they coated the brick with asphalt and burned it to make it waterproof.
Right, they would float, or you can do. They were doing things like that as well. And the other one was, I think, like porous or something like that. So when the fire would go, it was a brick and it didn't really burn. It can take withstand high heat. I just want to point out that so you have the Bible with the flood, the deluge, and basically that destroyed everything the first time. The second time, you can look at the Tower of Babel being destroyed by fire and brimstone as the second version, the second destruction. It's literally he destroyed it with fire and brimstone. And it was said, he goes, "Don't worry, my promise is a rainbow in the sky that I will never flood you guys again." That's from God, from Yahweh. The second one, they said, "I will, destroy everything with fire." And what he did was he brought that down upon them. So that was their apocalypse, and you have to think that the whole second coming of like Jesus Christ or this avatar figure has been done thousands of times in numerous civilizations over and over and over. It's the same story over and over and over. So, they basically lived out that entire story of Revelation. They had that there. He's literally the new man.
Want to say something, Ron?
Go for it.
I just wanted to pipe in on the two pillars. I mean, I know we get our lessons in masonry about the pillars, and that there's lots of
Mhm.
stories about, but I would even I would even propose, were the pillars something that was an actual physical thing, or was it just a
Yes.
concept? Because
No, it was
because
physical.
I mean, think about this. Think about if there was an ancient civilization that had knowledge, and someone was able to attain that knowledge from a previous generation after some massive cataclysmic event, wouldn't they be considered magical? I mean, if
Yeah.
he's considered in some areas as the inventor of the sciences, the inventor of building and creating
Mhm.
of great societies. I mean, what if these stories of these pillars were nothing more than just a metaphor for the knowledge that was passed on from this ancient society? I mean, people like Graham Hancock believed that there's a possibility that there was a society here maybe 40,000 plus years ago, 100,000, a million years
Absolutely.
ago, that had superior ancient knowledge. And if there's a cataclysmic event that happens and destroys, you know, everything, almost everything, what if there is these bits of information that are passed on, regardless of whether it was a physical, whether it was an actual
Right.
pillar that held these ideas of science, or just, men that came from the sea wearing their fish hat, the fish hat theory, and a
Awareness,
lot
yeah.
of of men that came from the sea to pass on this ancient knowledge of how to build, and how to have the sciences, and how to look at the stars. I mean, that's the thing that I think about when I think about these references to Nimrod being this this creator of the sciences, and this creator of buildings, and creating a new society, essentially, after an antediluvian or a massive cataclysmic event. And when I was looking stuff up, the consensus amongst biblical scholars was that Nimrod was a reference not to an individual, but to an ancient people. So what if there was a group of people that actually had this knowledge and was able to create these sciences, or knew these sciences, and create these new buildings and massive structures of the tower, like the Tower of Babel? They'd be considered magical to these
Right, right.
people. The
Most
farmer, if you think about who would survive after a cataclysmic event, it probably would be the guys that are living out in the middle of nowhere, that aren't necessarily the scientists, and the people that are building societies. They're the backwoods guys. They're the survivors. They're the hunters.
Mhm.
They're the guys that know how to get away from stuff. So it would appear magical to them.
Or you're a witch and you have to die now.
Right,
Right.
right. Yeah, basically he knew where this was at. So, he went, and whether it was the people who were in that city that got, succumbed to the flood and the mud, and they came back later, but they knew exactly where to dig. And then that's what he did. He pillaged that old society, that old civilization that was there, and he pillaged their sciences and he pulled them up because there's even a part where they're like, "Oh wow, he found them." And now he's gathering men. And that's how he was gathering men, by showing them, look at the great wonders that I can do. I can do what God can do, because now he's learned these sciences, and he was applying them. He was handing out jobs. This is why he becomes, the master mason. He becomes the grand master, because he's literally handing out jobs, he's teaching, and he's bringing men together.
So do you know the history behind that? Uh, how it was introduced into masonry?
How what?
Nimrod.
Well,
Origin.
the
Please
thing
come.
the
I
thing that I
don't.
saw was
I
that
couldn't find anything.
was that was that science, architecture, and geometry were all synonymous. So anytime there was a great king or someone that had built a great monument or a temple or anything like that, it was connected to greatness and often billed as a great mason. And as far as Freemasons, we want to connect ourselves to those ancient parts of history. So, you know, I was I was doing my best to try to find. I know that I've heard in the past that Nimrod was originally like a patron saint, or like someone that we revered within Masonry, and I couldn't find that. I don't know if it was Mackey that talked about it. Possibly Mackey talked about it. Um, and I don't have Mackey's book, so I wasn't able to look that up. But at some point in time, Nimrod, from what I've learned, was Nimrod was lost, and then Solomon became the great architect, because he was that guy that was connected with science, architecture, geometry, the great builder, someone who you know, did something that was beyond comprehension for the average person of the time or whatever. But the thing is that from what I was seeing is that Nimrod had a charter of building. So he essentially set the guild together to do these massive to undertake these massive
Ziggurats.
construction projects. The
Yeah, there are
ziggurats,
whole cities. He built like
exactly.
6 of them, yeah.
So
Which when we look at the stories we've been told within Masonry about Solomon, that's why we relate to him as the first great Grand Master, because he created this charter and set these people on their, set them within the different classes that had their different jobs and all of that type of thing, to be able to have harmony during the building process.
correct, but if you were to really look at stone building, right? Stone buildings, and if you're going to say this is the first builder, well, then technically it would be Nimrod, because after the flood, he was the one who was actually doing all the
He
building.
was a great builder, yeah.
So I could see the relationship, but then again, if you look at his all the lore behind Nimrod, it's very negative, and to have that person, or that person as uh, um to have that person as head of a lodge, or head of masonry,
The first, right?
it just doesn't make any sense for us to use it. That's why I do prefer, me personally, out of the two, of course, I prefer King Solomon, because it makes a little more sense. Although there's still controversy there, but it's more relatable. You know, that's just me. I mean, that's my
Well,
personal opinion.
So
I
the
w-
only thing that I can tell you about Freemasonry and Nimrod for sure is that his offspring, or his grandson, I was trying to find it right here with Peleg. So Peleg is something else I wanna, do another show on, but Peleg was actually a great builder, and he built amazing things. He was like Haram, but he learned it from Nimrod and learned it from all that. So I do know that, Peleg was a master builder. He built all kind of stuff. I think that this is his grandson. So Nimrod had a grandson named Peleg, which we'll probably do a show about later. Very mysterious guy, but he's kind of like Tubal Cain, like he created some really amazing stuff and really flourished with the sciences that was brought from those twin pillars. And then just to say that twin pillars, one had terrestrial sciences, and the other one had celestial sciences, if that rings a bell in Freemasonry.
Mhm.
Right.
Bingo bango.
Bingo bango.
So another thing that kind of threw me off was the relationship with Abraham. So if you're looking at the timeline, you're looking at Nimrod and then meeting Abraham. It kind of doesn't match up, but yet you're reading this text, and it's in some versions it's saying that um, Nimrod orders the killing of all newborn babies. However, Abraham's mother escapes into the fields and gives birth secretly. Sounds familiar, right? Sounds like
Right.
the story of Moses.
Right. Moses.
Um,
And also Jesus.
yes, at a young
Jesus,
age.
the same stories echoed over
Exactly,
and
just told in
over
different
and
ways and
over.
different characters, and
Mhm.
also different characteristics. Because,
Slightly.
well, yes and no. Because if you're going to compare Abraham to Moses to Melchizedek to Jesus, you see the evolution,
They all
right?
rebel. They're
No,
all
but you
rebelling.
see the evolution of the
Mhm.
person. It's more of a higher consciousness that this
I I I think that I think that you're seeing the evolution of time and of different eras and of different political socioeconomic situations because, I was about to reply to you, Mike, as far as the concept of Nimrod being, quote, the bad guy versus Solomon being the good guy. And, I think part of that was that as Masons, we refer to Josephus as being a historian that told us great things about Solomon. But if you really look into it, I think Josephus may have been one of the
Fibber.
first. Well, he may have been one of the first. He may have been the first media that was being
Yeah.
influenced by whoever was paying him. So
Look at that.
obviously, if someone had a negative idea of the kingdoms in Babylon or Assyria, they and there were people that were, more powerful kings in other places that were influencing Josephus's, stories, then obviously Josephus is going to have more positive thoughts and references and history written about Solomon than maybe about Nimrod if especially during that time when there was, we talked about what was going on in that area with Enlil Yankee on our last episode, and the times were changing, and so then there's new kingdoms and there's new gods, and did Yah take over from the concepts of Ea before and Enki, and those the did the old gods become the new gods, and did the new political and socioeconomic situations influence the next? So I would say, Mike, is that yes, there's a certain progression and a growing, and possibly the what you were hinting on as far as the expansion of the consciousness, thinking of
Correct.
the progression of that story. But also I think you have to look at each individual era and time and how that grew into, how one begat another from the stories, and knowing that religions took over the other religions, and the gods morphed into different stories and different gods with the
right.
same characteristics as previous situations.
So let me go back to Abraham because there's still a lot to cover there and a bunch of different stories. So there's a part where Abraham, um, we'll get to that in a minute.
Mhm.
There's a part where Abraham has his subjects gather wood for 4 whole years so as to burn Abraham in the biggest bonfire the world have ever seen. Yet when it was lit, and Abraham was thrown in there, he walks out unscathed. In other versions, you have Nimrod and then challenges Abraham to battle. When Nimrod appears at the head of an enormous army, uh, Abraham produces an army of gnats, which destroys Nimrod's army. Some accounts say that um, one gnat or mosquito entered Nimrod's brain to drive him out of his mind, and that ended that as well. Also, in another version, Nimrod repents and accepts God, offering numerous sacrifices that God rejects, also with Cain. Other versions have Nimrod give to Abraham a conciliatory gift, the giant slave Eliezer, who some accounts describe as Nimrod's own son.
Giant, huh?
The Bible also mentions Eliezer as Abraham's major domo. We're not making any connection between him and Nimrod. So you have all these different stories coming from all kinds of different directions. W- I don't even know where to start with this.
Oh, just going off base of what you just said right now about Nimrod's own son being a giant. I just want to point out that Nimrod is a grandson of Noah. So, and when Noah was born, this is strictly biblical. This is in the Bible. You guys can go read this, where the birth of Noah. When Noah was born, he was so bright and he was shining, just like the shining ones, the Anunnaki, that the room lit up, and his hair was white as wool. And his eyes were blue. When when his father supposedly comes home, he turns to his wife and says, "What angels have you been sleeping with? Because that's not my son."
Toe.
He was so different looking, and he looked so different. This is why Noah was talking and walking with angels all the time. They would come and watch him build the ark and hang out with them and tell him how to do things and stuff like that. So if Noah was part Nephilim or Nephilim, um, so would Nimrod, and hence why his son would be a giant. I much wanted to point that out really quick. And then you were talking about him dying, Nimrod dying or going crazy in the end with a
Right.
gnat in his head. Other versions of how Nimrod dies is that Shem, his great uncle, actually kills him and then scatters his remains across the land. The priests of Nimrod claim that Nimrod became the sun in order to continue to worship him. And then other
Osiris.
right. It's all the same stories over and over. Here's another story you may have heard, or which may sound familiar. Upon Nimrod's death, he had become resurrected as the sun god. Nimrod used his sun rays to miraculously inseminate Semiramis, his wife, with a child. This child was divinely conceived. The child's name was Tammuz. This is something you guys can all look up. Tammuz, the divine child, was born on December 25th and
Hmm.
celebrated every year by Nimrod's worshippers.
The sun god or the son of God?
Wow. And
Hmm.
he's literally called the new man too.
So where does it say or reference that he is the angel hunter?
The angel hunters. Okay, so this is where we get to the primogenital robes. So there's other stories where you go to. Now, this is going to be in references to like the Cave of Treasures. You can find this in the book of Adam and Eve or the book of Adam. There are some references as well in the book of Jubilees, which is oddly enough called like Little Genesis, but it's actually like twice as long as Genesis because it's full of these little details and other stories that were removed. But you can see where basically he gets these robes. Not only does he have ungodly strength already, most likely because he was a giant himself or an offspring, kind of like Gilgamesh or Samson. He had the strength of 10 men. You know, his arms had this more strength than 10 men together. But he had these robes that they believe that he stole from the Cave of Treasures, which he would have known about through his grandfather Noah, and being of descendant of Noah and stuff like that. These robes were celestial robes that Adam and Eve wore that had attributes and or things that can do that were not normal. One of them was that animals would basically come to him and lay down. Really weird. So he was able to hunt effortlessly. He literally did not need to hunt. After this, he would do all kind of sport. There's references of him killing bulls. I killed 100 bulls today, and that's nobody can meet that. Nobody can do that. But his robes were allowing him to do that. His vestial robes. You also have later on, he hunts every animal. Then he's like, I'm bored now. I've hunted everything, all big game, all little game. What else can I hunt? So what you're talking about, Mike, is where he becomes a great hunter before the Lord, which is this he was a great hunter in the earth in those days, but he was so in defiance of God that he would go and specifically seek out angels to try to hunt. What's really cool is that there are stories which I do not have references with me at the moment where he builds contraptions, mechanisms, and things like that to actually capture um, angels and or demons, whatever you want to call them. They're along the lines of Nephilim, Anunnaki, angels, demons, spirits,
Not human.
jinn. Yeah, they're not human.
Dimensional beings.
Yeah, or whatever you want to call them, that he entraps them. He uses gadgets and gizmos. I think in one of them, he has like a crossbow with a chain on it, which is pretty cool. So that the bow, the arrow goes through them, and there's chains on them, so they can't leave. He boxes them in these contraptions that are like traps that are boxes. It's a bunch of weird stuff. Um, but again, it's kind of going back to all these stories that overlap and that are echoes of civilizations throughout time immemorial, which is basically like Gilgamesh, Samson, uh, Solomon. He's very a Solomon type figure, which he has all this power that he has from gadgets like Solomon's ring, stuff like that, as well as Marduk in the future. Marduk is literally Jesus. So he is a Jesus figure. He was worshipped literally by man to Nimrod himself. Like there was not like, here's my statue. It's like, no, they were worshiping him. So he did a lot of crazy stuff.
So going to support that, Nimrod is to be identified with the Babylonian hero is Dubar or Gishdubar, Gilgamesh. The second of that, Sais and Pinches and others identified Nimrod with Marduk, the Babylonian Mercury. The former identification is based on the fact that Isdubar is represented in the Babylonian epos as a mighty hunter, always accompanied by 4 dogs, and as the founder of the great kingdom in Asia. Hmm.
Orion. He was definitely connected with Orion as well, the great
Correct.
hunter.
So that's the great hunter. That's where we get that from. Um, 2 other theories may be mentioned. One is that Nimrod represents the constellation of Orion. Others that Nimrod stands for a tribe, not an individual. Now, we go back in rabbinical literature. Nimrod is the prototype of a rebellious people, his name being interpreted as he who made all the people rebellious against God. Um, Also, I believe his name was also interpreted as he whose words are dark. So this is the negative part, right? This is
Well,
where
just the whole thing about him, like, he just
It's
took it
per
upon himself to be like, I built all this. I did all this on my own. I did not rely on God. I didn't call upon God. Why do we need this dude? Why do we need God around? So he started showing people, like he would do these things. He would say, like, you guys, he would go and have people who worship God. He goes, call upon God right now. Do it. Do it. I'll spare your life. Have him come down. Where's he? He's not here, right? Okay, death. Then he
I
would show
I
the
think,
other people. Yeah.
Mike, I think that concept is the whole perspective outlook on things. I mean, depending on who's telling the story and what their perception is, the Satan is the great provider of all and God is the evil one, but then from a Christian perspective, it's the opposite situation, I mean, that type of thing where depending on who's telling the story is what the concept is behind it. I mean, in Hungarian mythology, the ancestors of Huns and Magars were the twin sons of Nimrod and Eneth. So, I think that there's definitely certain areas where people are going to hold him up as this great person, this great king or whatever it was, the connections to Marduk and to Orion and all of that versus the new Hebrew God supporters saying he was bad because he caused the people to rebel against it. So
Yeah, that's an interesting take on how this character played out through the ages, and how the story has been altered at different times, all to make one person represent when you go against God, bad things happen,
Correct.
right? When you go against the Creator, you're you're pretty much going against your own nature. But then we look at things, and going. And this is referring to our previous podcast that we did last week, when we talk about the Creator. As we know, there were several creators. There wasn't just one, and if we're trying to reference Yahweh as the Creator, and we also know that Yahweh was part of the Canaanite
Yeah, he
pantheon,
was a storm god,
which we
god
know
of strong winds.
the Canaanite pantheon is were the children of the, what is it, Sumerian pantheon,
Mhm.
right? So when we're looking at creator, it's, would we say, well, Yahweh was the one who created these certain groups? Is that what we're saying? Or are we saying in general, right? Or we're saying, or we're looking further back?
We gotta look further back because just like how all these archetypes, their names are changing, Yahweh's name changes. Yahweh has all kind of names, and they change around all the time. Um, there's a lot of names out there for each god or goddess or the villain of a story. You can flip that over to from Chaldean to all kind of stuff, and you find these archetypes that are all the same. It's all the same. The names are slightly different. The places are slightly different. The core story or the meaning or the teaching that's within it is all the same. It's echoed throughout human um, history over and over again.
Correct. I just want to read off some things that some people are writing in the chat. Um, Roy Musico, very exciting topic, brothers. Thank you for joining us. We're glad you're here on and talking with us. Amari AF, does any of the non-biblical texts on Nimrod list his genealogy besides the Bible? Does any of the non-biblical text on Nimrod list his genealogy besides the Bible?
Okay, so that's funny you guys asked that. So of course, before coming over here, I had to dive into my library and pull out a bunch of stuff to read really quick, just to have a little refresher. So when you take Sumerian king lists or any type of king lists like that, you can put them side by side with biblical lineage. I'm talking like from Adam on down, and you can find references to them or similarities to them. Yes, you can find that. Um, and these are non-biblical. This would be like Chaldean, this would be Sumerian, Akkadian, or Assyrian. I think the one that I just read right before coming here, I was actually gonna take a picture of it and read it here, and I didn't do it. It was Assyrian. It was a Syrian king list that you want to go check out. It's got Enoch in there. It has Lamech, Methuselah. It has a whole list that going down from Adam, Seth, and it all its way down. So yes, you can go check that out. That happens actually time and time again. So if you want to take the time and find king lists and put them together with god lists or these crazy gods that live forever, you can actually match them up. That is a very good question, Amory. Awesome question.
Yes. So, looking at the, what was it, the rabbinical text,
You
it's showing that,
can also find stuff of him in the Haggadah.
okay, but even to the, well, to the Hebrews, I mean, Nimrod was the rebellious one, right? And then if we trying to, again, I'm trying to relate this to Masonry. I understand the usage, right? The usage, because he was self-reliant, self-sufficient,
He was
built,
about teaching and about the sciences.
correct,
That was his
passing on
ammo.
that knowledge.
Right. That was what made him get to the status that he had. He was already strong, You can't just be strong. You got to be smart. And that's why he went to dig up those pillars. And once he had those pillars, he solidified. Because you imagine he was defying God not for a day, not for a month, not for a year, for a lifetime. He ran around and he did all kind of stuff in the face of God, in the face of his worship of God's worshipers, right? He did amazing things. He built amazing things. He fast forward human civilization from mud to a tower and 6 cities and teachings and
Exactly.
and whole like avenues of work. You have different job titles. You had skill sets that were out. You're a farmer, you're a builder, you're a warrior. He built all that. And people flocked from around the world to go there. There's another reason why they called it Babylon, and the Babel is because you have different diaspora. Diaspora are people who move from their land and go to another land. You had people after the flood who basically fled to him because he was building stuff when nobody else was. Imagine you're in like some mud hut or a straw hut just trying to survive with your family off the land because that's this crazy flood happened. And it's 5 years later. Then you hear or you see these pilgrimage going to Nimrod saying, "Hey man, it's way better over here. They got food, they got jobs. You're gonna go because that's life there." No, that's not that hard of a life. He built these cities, so he did give hope to these people. And then on the flip side, you had people who wanted to stay away because he was ungodly. So, and those people were more out in the countryside. And were they building towns and cities too? Yes, yes, they were, but not like him. He was building skyscrapers. He was building stuff real fast,
Massive ziggurats.
right? Like nothing. But so basically, he hit the ground running as soon as he found those pillars, and he knew exactly where to go.
How did he know that though? Like, how did
That's
he
the
know
thing
where
that
to
they
find
don't
them?
talk about.
Yeah,
So
right.
either he came across just like Moses did. Hey, what's up on that mountaintop when he's at that well and he fixed the well for those 3 young ladies, and they brought him back to their father. And he goes, "What do you want?" Because I want to know what's on that mountain. Oh, that's just an old god that's up there. Cool. I'll be right back. Hold my beer. We'll go talk with that god. And what did Moses do? He struck a deal with that god. And all of a sudden, Moses knows where to go, what to do, and how to do it. Most likely, he found something. He went somewhere. And at this point, a lot of gods dwelt within mountaintops. And when you got a flood, everybody's going to a mountaintop. So, um, who knows, man? They just really don't
Yeah,
know. It's just that you can.
I find it really interesting too. I mean, wasn't now Nimrod was well before Solomon as far as a timeline's concerned, correct?
Yes, Nimrod was way before Solomon.
So
Yes.
so if we're talking about the pillars in masonry, we're taught that Solomon had the pillars built. So how were there pillars prior to the pillars that Solomon built?
Because they're the same pillars. So you have to imagine Solomon was taught by the same things that taught Nimrod. The same jinn, the same fallen angels, the same angels, or whatever you want to call them, they're still around.
Got it.
Sorry? Yeah, they're still around. So
Yeah.
he used his ring to subjugate. Solomon used his ring to subjugate all kind of jinn or angels and workers or whatever you want to call them to do all kind of stuff to put his building on a fast pace, and the civilization around Solomon flourished by using these sciences. Again, it was terrestrial sciences and celestial sciences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I remember when I was going through my degrees, and Ron pulled me aside and he started talking to me about the pillars. And when he mentioned about how many cubits they were, but after the temple got sacked, they weren't the same size. So that alludes to certain stuff for the sanctum sanctorum inside the temple being dropped down and hidden from whoever or whatever invaders came through.
Correct. So you have on the pillars, there was writing on the pillars.
One ring to rule them all.
Right. So 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 if those pillars were
Dre bat.
were dropped right? If those pillars, that was a really good reference. If the pillars were dropped, then that sciences that were at the top of it was now hidden. And so you had
Well,
a
the
lot of this hidden because you don't want that to fall in the hands of other people. We have this famous saying, no, don't letter, hack, engrave, or anything like that. And you hear that from from mistakes because he found those pillars and he did all kind of stuff with them.
because that information wasn't for the profane.
Correct.
the
So
reference Mike was
Yeah.
saying, James, was that something that I had found, a story that I had found was that supposedly the reason that Solomon brought Hiram out of Tyre was because Hiram was very knowledgeable in sand lever systems, and supposedly the pillars were hollow and contained levels of sand, and the sand would disperse, allowing a system of some type of pulleys to hide the Ark of the Covenant in a place where if someone were to ransack the city would be unable to find it. And so supposedly when Nebuchadnezzar came to the temple to ransack it, the pillars were determined to be a different height.
Yes. So this is 100% true. Um, the the Jewish folks in Israel still do this today. So they have this pulley system where it actually drops down a couple 100 feet below the temple or whatever they want to save. So there's the Dead Sea Scrolls, or one of the most sacred scrolls that they have. It's in a museum, and that exact pulley system is set up. It's a little bit more high tech now, but basically, if they were to be bombed, if there was an earthquake, if there was anything type of an attack, it automatically drops down a couple 100 feet into a vault, and it's completely safe. But yes, you are 100% right on that one. That's really cool that you brought that up. That's actually super cool. But yeah, it's super cool that they're still using that today for their most precious items that they have in museums. Really, really cool.
well, I think that's what I have for that. But I would like to talk about some other things if you guys are up for
We're always up for talking. I think that's what we kind of do here, man.
it. Yesterday we if anybody has any more questions on Nimrod, please ask
Please
in
get
the
them out
chat,
now.
and then we'll go ahead and ask them. And but right now, I believe that's what we covered in general as far as Nimrod is concerned.
Hey,
It
Mike.
was a lot of information to digest.
Hey, Mike, if you don't mind
But
me interjecting really quick, I just want to
sure.
give a shout out to the people in the chat room right now. That joined us tonight. We have Mascara. We have
What's up, Mascara?
El Mighty Mexican, Amory AF, Drebat. We have Hement Kobe. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. Man Beast Twin. Who else we got? NL
It's been on
Chavez.
before.
We have Derek
Right on.
Craig,
Thank you guys.
Roy Musico. We have Japanese characters that I cannot read. I think that was it for now. But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys all for joining, and not only for just joining in and listening, but thank you for interacting and talking with the guys and asking questions. So go ahead, Mike. Sorry to cut you off. I just want to do that real quick. since
No,
we
no
had a
worries,
little-
man. It's
had
always
a little
good
down
to
moment.
yeah, it's always good to recognize the people that that we like to do this for. It doesn't
Absolutely.
happen without you guys.
We
So
are here because of you guys.
yeah. So yesterday we went to Montebello Whittier Masonic Lodge, and we had we heard a lecture on druids by
Mhm.
Brother
It was a good
Emiliano,
lecture.
and well, if we were to do a podcast on druids, just by hearing what he says, like there's really literally they did not keep records of anything.
Mhm.
So it's just mouth to ear or
Yeah.
certain symbolism.
Right.
And then that had to be studied because the symbolism still isn't 100% viewed as okay, that means that,
Right.
right?
Right.
So yesterday it was a really cool experience, just having a different flavor. I mean, I know we've been to a bunch of different lectures in different places, but this one was very refreshing. I really liked it. It was a lot to was a lot to digest, but at the same time, Emiliano, the way he lectures, it's very soothing, and at the same time, you're digesting it very well, and I appreciate that very much in a lecturer,
Right.
because they're not just throwing a bunch of information at you, and you're trying to
He
trying to
was he
hold it
was
all.
actually talking
He
to
was
you.
actually talking to us and
Right, right.
asking questions, and
Making jokes.
I was chatting with him earlier, and hopefully we could get him on the show sometime in February, because I believe he's busy January, but I would like to get him on the show and talk. Um, Also, we have brother Mario Moreno, who
Which we definitely want to do a show
we
with.
definitely want to do a show with, about occultism and Freemasonry.
I think I talk to that guy almost every day now.
We're definitely in the works with that. I would like to do that for late December, towards near the holiday would be our last show of the year. And then, in January, I would like to reach out to Bruised Wayne. We haven't talked. I've been talking with him here and there, but I do want him to talk about the Leo Taxel
Which
hoax.
is it was a
So
great
he's got a
lecture,
whole
yeah.
presentation on
Mhm.
that, and that's something that we could all dig in on. Um, then later on in February, Know Thyself podcast. Those are some folks that I've been in contact with as well. And we want to be on each other's shows so that we can help each other grow. And not only that, is share conversations and topics about things that interest us. That's the whole purpose of us creating this group. It's an esoteric study group, but it's a study group that's for everyone.
I
Absolutely.
was just gonna pipe in and say on the podcast, the last one that I think I listened to was on the blood. They were talking about the life force of the blood and stuff like that, and that was a very interesting podcast. Know Thyself. Those guys, they've got a great podcast.
Yeah, I think that'll be a very, very interesting. So we have a lot coming down the pipeline. We just have to, solidify some things and move forward with them and bring some more content to you guys. Also, we do have another page and on IG. It's Keepers KOTW _ and that is where we're going to have just our personal content stuff that we do, and it's more related to the podcast rather than the Keepers page is more related to everything. It's a meme page. So yeah, that's where that was a mouthful. I know
That was a mouthful then. Yes.
And don't you have somebody to plug, James?
I do, I like to keep my finger on the pulse of the community of Los Angeles, the esoteric community of Los Angeles, including the magic community, the occult community, Masonic community, anything like that. So if you guys are in the LA Basin area and you guys will be interested in going to a winter solstice festival, there will be one held on December 4th, 2021 from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Scottish Rite Cathedral in downtown Long Beach. So this will be the Long Beach Winter Solstice Festival. My friends over at Frey's Hermetic Supplies is throwing this event. They are really, really cool people. They are definitely a large part of the community. These are the guys that actually help supply the all the metaphysical stores out there, the witch stores, the stores that are teaching, giving classes on various things from traditional witchcraft to um, just about anything at Wicca and anything else that's out there. Please support them. It is a huge, it's a pretty good event. It's a huge building and it's a really cool place. You guys can check them out at LB Winter Solstice Festival on Instagram. Please hit them up, follow their stuff. They will be doing more events and stuff like that in the future. You guys can actually go to www.longbeachwintersolsticefestival.com to check them out. I will actually be there. I'll be helping out and checking things out for myself. I'm hoping personally that there will be a in-person Krampus.
That would be awesome.
I told her I would love to see that there. I really hope they have one because I want I want photos. And I want my kid to see a living person Krampus.
Somebody did mention right now, real quick. or shows. What about the collapse of the dollar? That's
That's a whole nother
that's
show,
a whole
man.
other show, man.
It's a whole nother show. I can take apart the
Different.
dollar for you and all the markings on the dollar bill and our money and what it folds into
That
and
was
its meanings and all this other stuff. But that's like 4 episodes.
that was Man Beast Twin, and then El Mighty Mexican. He said, I was told by 32nd Degree Noah was an initiate who reestablished the mysteries after the flood. Hence, he taught Cush, who taught Nimrod. So his descendants to this day must know the real story. Very interesting.
Very interesting. I will say, what Noah did immediately after the flood was drink a whole lot of alcohol.
Yes.
He partied hardcore and got super drunk. He got naked and he went and slept in his tent. And this is how we get the curse of the Canaanites and all that good stuff, because the brothers they had to wake up Noah, but they were so afraid of going in there, and because they knew that he had a little bit of a temper when he was drunk and he was woken up, and they actually basically drew straws who had to go wake him up. And it sucks because he went in there and tried to wake him up and immediately got cursed because he saw his father naked. So that sucks, man. It's a really weird story, but that's also in your guys' Bible, man. Go check it out.
I think we'd all be cursed if we saw our dads naked.
Right. He literally woke up and cursed his son and banned him, basically. And later Moses goes and takes it. God says, Noah cursed him, so I give you this land. Do with the people as you wish. That's why he cut men and women in twain with a large saw that 2 men had to hold side by side.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gentlemen, do you guys have any shout outs or any people you want to mention?
Of course, I do have shout outs. Phrase Hermetic Supplies. We have A Crooked Path, Points of Light, Dragon in the Rose. I gonna shout out to OTO Sapphire Lodge. I want to give a shout out to Poke Runyon and Max at the OTA. I want to give a shout out to everybody that showed up to our events. I want to give a shout out to everybody that's showing up to lectures wherever they may be, because you guys are empowering yourself. You guys are better be able to ask questions and be part of our community. Go out there and educate yourself. Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir.
Do you know if Poke's planning on doing a winter solstice event, James?
Sorry, say it one more time.
You know if Poke is planning a winter solstice event?
I know that maybe. I know right now, because everything is going on, there's not a lot of activity at the location that they would normally do that at.
Mm-hmm. Let me know if you find out. I'd love to be involved in that.
I will let you know if when I do hear anything. I will let you know. I know that Max has been hanging out quite a bit, so it's been fun with hanging out with Max.
He's a cool guy.
Yes, he is.
So just I've been getting some questions on, hey, when are you guys going to do Esotericon? Actually looking for a place right now, and it's kind of looking good at the moment. So as soon as we are able to lock that down, then we'll set up a date and we'll continue with that. But we are looking at probably around May of 2023. So yes, we're gonna have to get through 2022 and go through that shenanigan.
Make sure there's no more COVID.
Yeah, let's get through this part, and then we'll create another awesome event for everybody to come check out all the lectures, workshops, and all the awesome vendors. Most of them are the people that James just mentioned. So we're definitely working on that. I want to give a shout out to the guys at Montebello Whittier Lodge. Thank you very much for hosting. Thank you for the fellowship and the refreshments afterwards.
Yes.
It was a good time. I want to say what's up to Brother Rene and Art Gallardo.
What's up?
Badass fucking tattoo artist.
Shirts.
We also have Sanctum Secretum. Check out their company. Check out their shirts. And also buy Mason. That's another thing that I always like to tell you is just buy Mason. Make sure when you're buying something that has a Masonic square compass, make sure it's from a brother, because that person
there are so many
created that.
People out there that are not Freemasons selling stuff. Just 2 days ago, I had 3 different stores trying to follow me and want me to support them, and they are not Freemasons.
Yeah, so it's like there's a bunch of them: Freemason, 3x3 store, Brick Mason. The way you could identify them,
right?
is just look at their graphics. They suck. They're just
It's cheap.
lame, dude. They look like just and they have dumbass sayings too, like I'm more than a man. I'm a mason. What
Right.
kind
Or
of
they're
bullshit is
Right.
or they're stealing them from other people like Brother Carl Hearn. You know, you've seen his stuff popping up on some of those Fugazi
Yeah.
sites also.
Yeah,
Some
dude. And I found that a lot of these guys that they're just printing them out in Vietnam or the Philippines and passing themselves off as brothers. Then when you
yeah.
start questioning them, you know that they're not brothers, and you call them out on it. It's like, oh, I'm just trying to, sell these shirts, man.
Right.
Yeah, but you don't understand. There's actual dudes who are brothers who went through the degrees and aren't lying to people.
Yeah, they're not lying. Not only
So
that, but there are groups that are sacred, sacrum. Basically, is they have shirts that are made for Masons by Masons.
exactly,
It's made by
yeah,
Masons.
Sanctum
The
Secretum.
company is from Mason.
It's made by Mason, and it's also printed by a Mason.
Printed by a
at 10
Mason.
Fathom Designs, bitches.
I mean, that's just like that's masonry times 3 right there.
See, you're getting like a triple threat right there.
That
Yeah, for
third degree.
So, do you have anybody to shout out to, Ronnie or Brian?
I've like I said, I've been traveling around up here. I had a chance to visit the brothers up at Mariposa Lodge last weekend, and that was very cool. They actually they're a small lodge. They need a lot of help to do their degrees. Usually, they actually asked me to sit in the marshal's position. I was there visiting for the first time, and it was election. So, as you know, marshals got to bring the flag in during election. So,
Yeah.
I got to go to work right away. So, it's cool. It's cool meeting new brothers in this area up here. I'm going to continue to travel and check that out. I'm also trying to explore some of that occult community. I know we've got a couple of shops in downtown Merced, so I'm going to be cruising down that way and checking out and supporting them and getting them on board once we get Esotericon going on and seeing if we can get them down there. So, and just being
Cool.
involved in that. Other than that, I'm just enjoying being in the middle of nowhere.
Right on, man. So I think it's time to close it up, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in. However you are watching us, comment below. Let us know what part of the show was your favorite. For questions regarding the show, content ideas, booking inquiries, sponsorship, or just simply to say hello, visit the contact page at keepersoftheword.net. Or you could always DM us on Instagram. We answer promptly. And I definitely want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening. We greatly appreciate it. And we hope